Okay. Well, that's a good start. Yeah, here we go. All right. So we made it. Hello. Welcome to the Branch Out podcast. I'm Vince Mahama.
Hi, I'm Emmanuel Boder. We're finally able to do this. We're a bit delayed due to some unforeseen circumstances. And as you can see, we are actually in two different locations. Or maybe not, who knows? No, the
This
point
is just
is
green
that,
screen here.
yes. The point is that I had a bit of a sniffle, and so I'm just pulling all my resources together to be able to do this evening, because it's important that we do things on time and when we say we will.
Yeah. Leading up to this, I remember earlier today, work. There was a lot going on at work, and then I saw you wrote me an email, an SMS, because I wasn't getting notifications from Signal. So I look at that and just see like, oh, okay, I need to look at Signal and see. And then it's just like, I'm feeling sick. I don't know if I could do it. It's like,
Yeah.
stuff always gets in the way, but we persevere.
That's it. These things happen. Well, so what is it now? It's Wednesday. So the week has just basically run its halfway course. How's the week treated you so far, Vin?
How's it treated me so far? I mean, I've been really busy, but
Good
keeping
busy?
with it. Good, yeah, good busy. I mean, it's fulfilling busy, I guess. So now rounding it off with this, honestly, I can't complain. What about you?
That's great. Yeah, I had a bit of a crazy start to the week on Monday, and then Tuesday was another crazy day. I started feeling a little under the weather towards the end of the day, and I thought I'll just sleep it off. And yeah, that didn't work quite as expected. So
Yeah. So we on social media and everywhere where we were promoting this, we had a few topics listed. But today we decided to sort of cut that down a little bit and simplify it, since you're under the weather and we're in these spontaneous circumstances. So we're just gonna hit on our two main topics.
well,
pretty
we're
simply.
skipping the gourmet baby food.
Yeah,
right?
we're postponing it because that is gold right there. Like, I have it right here in my chair.
Did you get it?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay. Are you gonna
Yeah.
show us at least what you got?
I was gonna ask you about that because of brands.
Ah,
I mean, do we care?
I don't know.
All right.
What do you got there?
All right, hold on.
You can at least do a show and tell.
So, do
Oh
you
my
see
God,
this
that looks-
backwards like I do?
I mean, I can see it correctly. Bio.
Okay, good. Well, I got this stuff, which is like oats and apple, baby food. That actually looks
Yummy.
pretty good. I might, in like we were gonna test this out, right?
Yeah.
Today we were gonna like
Yeah.
do a food review, and it was actually gonna be useful because tomorrow I'm getting my wisdom teeth out, so I'm not gonna be eating regular food for the next couple of days, and like I might actually be eating some of this. Second one I got was banana, if you can see that,
Okay.
which I thought would be a cool experiment because maybe I don't like bananas unless it's like banana bread. So I thought maybe I might actually like them if it's in baby food.
Okay.
But am I allowed to try it?
Not now. Oh well.
No,
Yes. In these circumstances, I guess you would have to. Anyway.
I don't. I've got other food.
Okay. Well, I
I'll
leave
see.
it up to your judgment.
Maybe I'll stay strong. It actually looks good.
It looks good.
I actually would love to try it.
I was picturing the the little jars of baby food. That's what I was picturing when we said baby
I've
food.
never had kids, so you would know.
This is true.
So what is that? What, you just have like yogurt things, but there's baby food inside?
No, it's usually like an actual glass jar, little glass jars. That, yeah,
And
they're.
you buy them
It's
like
like,
that?
yeah, yeah. It's pre-made. It's like that's why I said to you earlier, like mashed potato, mashed carrot, mashed everything,
Yeah.
ground up. You know,
Well, I'm gonna be having that anyway for the next few days, so
there you go.
good
So,
times.
yes. So I
All right, do
guess
we
we
want to dig in?
might as well, yeah, jump into the first one and
All
see
right.
how far we can go on it. So the first topic we had was sense making,
Mm-hmm.
and it is really a huge topic. You can, I mean, without even, well, maybe thinking about it just for a couple seconds. Um, Sense making is the way in which we human beings make sense of the reality of the world around us.
Mm-hmm.
And as one can imagine, it's an incredibly complex process. I mean, if you start to just think about all of the things that go into how you make sense of the world around you,
Mm-hmm.
and thus lead to, you know, what decisions you're going to make in life, it gets really complex very quickly, even for some of the most rudimentary things that we do on a day-to-day basis.
Mm-hmm.
I guess for me, one thing that's interesting about sense making is just finding out from different people how it is that they go about sense making.
Right. And sense making, um, I've heard from a couple of people who I mentioned the topic to, that they understand that term sense making, or at least they initially understand it as like saying something that makes sense. But in this context, what we mean is trying to understand something or making sense of something.
Right.
So right, yeah, seeing the different ways that people actually experience the world and understand what they experience. At the end of the day, that sort of defines what they believe in, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. One of the things that I, in my brief contemplation about sense making, one of the things that I thought about was the way in which, well, for me to make sense of anything around me, I need information.
Mm-hmm.
That's, without information, I can't even think. Actually, I don't know if that's wrong or right, but I don't know if there is such a thing as thought without information. Actually, if you know what I mean.
It depends. I mean, if you have absolutely no information, I mean, you always have some modicum of information, right? Pretty much anything that you can come up with is based off of something that you've experienced and information that you've come into contact with. So yeah, I'd agree that if you have no information about something, you can't think about it. You can't have a thought about it.
Yep. So then it's like, I mean, information is not just a matter of, you know, something someone's written somewhere or video content, audio content. It's also actually what you see with your own eyes, as in the real world.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you have, like you said, if you have absolutely no information around you, information that's coming through all your five senses and maybe even additional senses, you can't think about the reality around you. There's just no.
So does that mean then that information itself is, it's not based in something like written in stone, because everyone perceives information differently, so no one person can define what it is?
You mean no one can define what information is, or what the information is?
What the information is. Like, for instance, there's the classic thing of colors, right? If you look at a strawberry, most people will say they see red, but and that's a fact, right? The strawberry is red. But is the color that you see the same one that I see? Is your red my red? Like, to you, the color you see is its factual color, but someone else might have another idea in their head.
So are you speaking like their shade of red might actually be different than my shade of red,
Right.
kind of thing?
Theirs might be green, and they just
Sure.
learned that it was red. Yeah.
I mean, I guess it's possible. I don't think it's plausible.
I don't think it's probable.
No.
No, but you never know.
Yeah. One would have to be able to see through others' eyes. Ooh, how poetic.
You'd have to see into their brain. Even if their eye physicality was exactly the same, the signals might be interpreted differently.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. So, but if information is a prerequisite to thinking, then information is not just important, it's vital to thought. And if the idea of thinking, like one could ask the question, okay, what's the point of thinking? If the idea of thinking, to me, the idea of thinking is to be able to process reality around us and come to conclusions, make decisions that we think are to our benefit.
Right.
That's like, that to me is the most, basic idea behind behind what it means to think. What is the goal of thinking?
What is the exact goal of thinking?
Well, that's what I think the goal of thinking is. That's what I think the goal of thinking is.
It's to make sense of the reality around you.
Yeah, but I think that's the process of thinking. The goal of doing that, going through that exercise. And by the way, people might not know this, but apparently your brain, like thinking, is actually the most exhaustive, like physically exhaustive thing that you can do. Your brain is actually the most resource intensive part of your body. So
that's why I'm so lean.
yeah, you do a heck of a lot of thinking there. So yeah, and then the goal of thinking to me would be that you are able to process this data, process this information, and then be able to make choices and decisions in life which benefit you. Right. So the information is vital. And then the next thing is, how are you going to make decisions that are truly not just, you thinking they are beneficial to yourself, and then you make the decision, then you find out after you made the decision, oh crap, that was not a beneficial decision to make.
Yeah.
How can you or what variable in this chain is incredibly important for one to be able to have a highest possibility to make decisions that are actually beneficial to yourself. We need information, but there's something about the information.
Well, it depends what kind of information that you get.
Correct.
Right? And also what you do with it. Even if you have the best information and all the information that you could ever need, if you don't do the work of processing it properly, you might end up in the same place as someone who had bad information or too little. And I mean, in today's world, pretty much everyone has access to basically all information that you could need, and so much more. Of course, the issue that I find, or at least the difficulty I find, is differentiating the good information from the bad information. That's where you get into the whole misinformation thing. One thing I've also come to realize is, because I was trying to base a lot of what I'm trying to do off of what I pretty much can only definitively define as fact. that's very exhausting, and it's also not really possible to do all the time. Like, you can't
Mhm.
know everything as fact. So you do have to also, even if you have incomplete factual information, you have to have sort of a way to still navigate yourself in the most likely of correct ways. I guess you could call that intuition.
Mhm. Yeah. Absolutely. So I think there's two things there that you mentioned which are key here. Number one is the quality of the information, right?
Hmm.
So that's the number one thing. And by quality, so how would we define what is high quality versus low quality information?
Well, you can go by how much of it you can actually verify yourself. Like, if
Mhm.
someone says dropping a stone will make it hit the floor, you could go out and try that yourself, and hey, there you go, there's your confirmation.
Mhm.
And the source didn't come from anywhere special, but you could verify it yourself. Um, and if it's something you can't verify yourself, something scientific that goes beyond your capabilities, for instance, you could go by where you're getting it from. Have they gotten it right
Mhm.
before? How
Mhm.
reliably have they gotten it right?
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
So the first point you brought up, and this is, I think, for me, this is key, and this has to do with the um, something like the matching of the information to reality.
Mm.
How close does the information that you are receiving match reality itself? And this is something that, of course, is not easy to do with everything because, as you said in the second point, where we don't there's many things we cannot verify ourselves.
Right.
We don't have the expertise, we don't have laboratories and all this kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
um, so at some point we do have to go off of what other people say, and we do have to yeah, we have to trust, right? We have to trust what they say. um, but the first point you brought up with the congruency that information has to reality, that for me is that for me is extremely important,
Mm.
because you can have a whole lot of information coming your way, and if the information you are receiving is so detached from reality that you have to go sort of into the deepest darkest corners of your mind to be able to find a match, then that to me would be very low quality information.
Well, it depends, because when you interact with people, you find out very quickly that people's perception of reality varies a
Hmm.
lot, right? So you
Yeah.
give them the exact same piece of information. Some of them will take it and say, "This matches my perception of reality. This must
Hmm.
be fact," and others will say, "There's no way. This doesn't match at all."
Hmm.
So into that, you also have to take into account how people even view their reality in the first place.
Right.
If
I
you
can
have
see how.
that not working properly, then that's kind of your measuring stick for everything else. Is, does it match my reality, right?
Mhm. And that I think brings us to the second point that you brought up earlier. You didn't use the terminology I'm about to use, but you essentially were saying that there is a sense of like the way you said, the way in which you process the information, right?
Mm.
And that is logic,
Hmm.
and that is so on the first in the first segment we have information is vital. Information needs to be good quality. um, One of the ways to define what is good quality is how congruent that information is with reality. But then it's taking a step back again to where we said information is vital. You said there it's also important that we process the information correctly.
Mm.
And that is the second part of, for me, that is so important to sense making, is the ability for us to think healthily. Like, to have good logic,
Mhm.
to not fall into logical black holes, essentially, you know.
Yeah.
And that sort of touches on what you were saying about, well, this person will have, two people looking at the same information and walking away with completely different perspectives on it.
Yeah.
And that for me is, it could be that the problem there is the information itself, that the information is just rubbish, but it could also be that there's logical fallacies occurring in the
Mm.
processing of the information. So that is where I see these two things needing to work hand in hand.
Mhm.
The quality of the information, but then also the quality of the processing.
Right. Those are sort of the yin and yang of the operation.
Yeah.
What you
And this
have
is
and what you do with it.
right. And this is unfortunately something that I find deeply disturbing in the educational system myself. Like watching my kids go through um, years of education. Some of it I would put with quotations. My son was just what is he now? 14 years old. Um, and I think it was yesterday or the day before, the whole class went to a queer exhibition. I mean, I don't know what the heck that has to do with school, right? Taking the kids to, and my daughter, by the way, who, when she was 15, she also was taken by the whole class to a LGBTQ, etc. Exhibition, museum. So the kids are getting all
So
of
this is
this.
part of the curriculum to basically expose kids to different sexual orientations and
Yeah,
you said LGBTQ, so also gender identities.
yeah.
Okay.
This is baked into the curriculum.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that wasn't always the case, definitely not.
No.
That's quite a recent thing, isn't it?
This is since this curriculum 21 or 21, curriculum 21 has been adopted in Switzerland. That's in there. I went and checked it myself because I just couldn't. I was like, this is part of your guys' curriculum. I'm going to find that. And sure enough, it's in there. It doesn't say specifically that they have to be taken to a museum, by the way. It just says the topics should be addressed.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. And I guess the teachers, to them, it's just sort of like, okay, instead of us doing all this awkward bullshit, let's just take them to an exhibition and have the kids trot around looking at, flowers arranged in a way that looks like female reproductive organs and mushrooms floating across the screens that look like male reproductive organs and so on.
With that last bit, I would say that is a bit of a peculiar thing to have kids being exposed to in an educational environment. But why do you think it's bullshit to expose kids to the other identities of people?
I don't think it's bullshit to. I don't think it's bullshit to. I don't think it's bullshit for your kids to, going about their lives to come into contact with, someone who is gay or whatever. What I think is bullshit is that it's part of the curriculum. That's what I think is just total nonsense. Like, okay, what next new thing are you going to have to put in the curriculum that is actually part of the school mandate? That like, what does the school have to do with that? I take my kids to school so they can learn, especially language, mathematics, science, and that's coming back to the logic thing. That's what I find so ridiculous, is that the kids are going to LGBTQ and queer exhibits, but I haven't seen or heard a single class in school that is regards like logic.
Mm-hmm. So would you say that this area of their curriculum, dealing with different sexualities and different sexual identities, do you think that is not useful, or do you think it's a negative thing to have in there?
I think it's a waste of time.
So
I
it's
I
not
guess it would be
useful.
more negative.
Okay. Oh,
As
okay. So
in,
you would put it in. Do you think that influence impacts children negatively as opposed to just time wasting?
no, I think it's more just time wasting. Like my son brought it up the other day, and he was like, it was just so boring. Like, and then he explained to me how they did this game where
Mm-hmm.
they sort of like they had they each were assigned an identity, and
Mm-hmm.
they had to essentially it was like who am I, but with an identity. So
Yeah.
you're getting asked questions. Well,
And then they act it out, or
well, no, they
how
didn't
does that
act it
work?
out, but you can imagine like, are you allowed to do this? Are you
Okay.
you know? So
Mm-hmm.
it gets a
How
bit
old are they
like
again?
14,
Okay. Yeah.
you know. So I would definitely put it under the completely unnecessary waste of time clause, and I would much rather prefer my kids do an hour of logic and how to think about things,
Mm-hmm.
and going through logical
Mm-hmm.
fallacies than this kind of stuff.
So there's the thing, right? There's not only a lot that's in school that honestly, even if it even has some positive influence on kids, there are other things that they could be doing in that time which is much more positive, right?
Right.
So for me, since especially nowadays in internet culture and essentially the world that young people are exposed to, different sexualities and different sexual identities are very common. They're baked into the landscape depending on where you point yourself. But generally, if you walk down the middle, you're going to run into it a lot. So I do think it can be useful for them to be exposed to that, if it's done in the right way, of course, if it's done in an educational way, to help them understand what it means essentially to be these different things, so that when they come into contact with it, they're not just confused and they don't know what they're looking at. However, at the same time, I'm curious as to why you picked that, right? Because there's so many different things in school as well that I personally experienced, even though I didn't go to public school from kindergarten on. More late in my school life, I actually went to public school. But while I was there, I noticed that there are a lot of things that not only were unnecessary, but even things that were positive could have been taught in a much more efficient way,
Hmm.
essentially achieving the task of efficiency, right? It's what it's about. That you have an issue with this being in school, it takes away from the efficiency. Essentially, time that could be invested in maximizing the potential of kids.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, the reason why I guess I find that to be so that topic to be um, to stand out from the other ones is like, if something is taught in school that is on the national curricula, right? This is nationwide curriculum for all schools in the country. I mean, that thing has to, in my mind, it has to have some really big importance in society. And to me, the idea of, for example, uh, you know, I don't know, the queer LGBTQ stuff. To me, that stuff is so few and far between. If you're just going along your life, along your, from day to day, you just go
Mm-hmm.
outside, you go to the shop, you do this, do that, get on the bus, whatever. I mean, it is so seldom that one is confronted with something that is, whether it's, I don't know, uh, I don't. it's so hard for me to even depict because it is so rare. Just like,
Yeah.
when are you ever going to come into contact with someone who is going to be um, uh, a man, but who is a woman, or vice versa, or uh, you know, um, yeah, it's just something that is so
Mhm.
of all the families we know, of all the people we know, which is something like maybe 100 different couples, so male and female couples. Um, one of them, we know one lesbian couple,
Mhm.
and zero gay couples. Like, I know gay lesbian is
Mhm.
basically
One's more
supposed to be the
specific.
same thing, or yeah. But so we know one lesbian couple, and our
Mhm.
kids have already come into contact with that, and it was no big effing deal.
Mhm.
And they came into contact with that with us parents being there and explaining a bit like this, that, and the other. So that's
Mhm.
the problem that I have with it, is this seems more to me like some kind of agenda driven thing, rather than, oh wait, there's like 30% of our population who are this, and we need to, educate y'all on that.
Okay,
This is
so
like,
I'll circle back around to that what you just said, but so just to wrap my head around what you mean here. So when you earlier said that it was a negative thing, um, it simply being a time waste doesn't explain it being negative. But then when you went on to explain it, as I understood it, it's for your average person. I think most people, your average person, will not come into contact with someone who is non-binary or trans, right? So the actual relevance for your average person is quite low. All the people who are trans or non-binary or any of the above,
mhm,
they would probably think it's quite relevant because, of course, it is to them.
mhm,
It's if it's taught more, then that will change how people perceive them. Um, but that's just the point of it not being that relevant. That's not yet negative. Um, but then when you go into sort of how your kids and you experienced it in the wild, just by
mhm,
actually coming into contact with people that are gay or non-binary, um, it's not that big of a deal if you're not an asshole. Because at the end of the day, people they do their own business, and that doesn't have to affect you. It shouldn't.
right.
Oh, my camera. Hey, the timing. All right. Let me see if I can fix that.
Yeah, no,
Right.
absolutely.
So how they experience it in school um, probably brings it to them in a way that it's not congruent with real life. When you actually experience it in real life, as opposed to seeing it in a museum, that might give kids a false impression. Is that kind of what you mean by the negative aspect of it?
Yeah, and like I said, it's just something that is so few and far between. I mean, there's probably more paraplegics in Switzerland than there are people with, how do you say, with alternate gender identities. You know, so
I don't
if
have the
we,
stats on that, but you might be right.
I mean, okay, pick your pick your handicap. Um, so the point is, like, if one is really trying to, if the aim of one is just simply like, hey, we have this demographic in the country who are, let's say, different from the average,
Mm-hmm.
so we want to give some exposure to the children, to that particular demographic.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then why aren't they going and visiting, handicap centers and all this kind of stuff? And that's where, for me, it doesn't make sense any way you cut it, except to say that there is some kind of ideological agenda behind this to get kids to be exposed to this at a very early age. I mean, if you think about a kid who, I don't remember the first time that my kids were exposed to this stuff, But I mean, at 14 years of age, being taken to a queer exhibit, that is like, I just don't know what the heck the education system has,
Well,
like
a lot of these
what business they have with that.
mhm. A lot of these topics are tied into sexuality, right? So it would make sense that if kids were getting educated on this, they'd be getting educated on general sexuality, right? Or at least it would be in tandem with a point in their lives where it's relevant, right? So you wouldn't teach this to a kid who's 7, because not only is it not really relevant to them, like physically, they probably couldn't wrap their head around it because they don't have the internal resources to actually wrap their head around it. So I think even if you're just looking at the age 14, to me this has always been sort of a challenging thought. Like, what age should kids actually start learning about sex and sexuality? Do it too late, they might be stunted because of their lack of knowledge, but if you do it too early, they might grow into it misunderstanding it because they weren't ready for it. So if you say that it seems like an agenda and that it's targeted towards receptive people, receptive kids, receptive because of their age, is there a way that could be done better if they were older, perhaps? Or is it just the nature of the thing and the potential agenda that's the issue?
No, I mean I think the ideological agenda has more to do with exposing them to this stuff to make them, from an earlier standpoint in their life, normalize it. Instead
Why would that
of
be?
ask the what is it called, identity politics. Ask those people. This is their game that they're playing.
Are you saying they have control over the education system?
Parts of it, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I don't think that's
So
a secret. Academia has been for decades taken over by the left.
so to draw an analogy, are you saying that this is like a guy who really likes apples planting a bunch of apple trees? Sort of working for self. Well, if you are someone who's non-binary, right? I'm not that. I've not come into not really come into contact with people who are non-binary, but from just seeing online and basically just having an outsider's look into it, and also just imagining, I would assume that hanging out with other non-binary people would be sort of a safe environment, right? Because you're automatically in the circle where you know that that'll be accepted, since a lot of people are critical towards that. So in basically making kids normalize it from a younger age, that's self-serving. That makes them become people that you actually will like to hang out with, and people like you will like to hang out with. So there's the analogy of the guy planting apple trees. It's self-serving. It's like, you're not going to plant an orange tree if you like apples, right?
I don't think that the people who are pushing these agenda are necessarily non-binary themselves or anything. I think they're using it in the scope of the full culture wars to push forward a certain agenda that they have. But no, I don't think that they themselves are all non-binary. I think the point is like this to me, right? Again, coming back to the information thing, we have a reality. There is a reality, right? It's kind of like the thing of, does the tree fall in the forest if nobody is there to watch it, right? So there is a reality that is existing. It's happening. Whether I say the strawberry is red or whether I say the strawberry is blue, the strawberry is something, and that something is real.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact of the matter is that when it comes to these non-binary and queer and so on, they form an incredibly small portion of society. I don't know exactly off the top what it is, but it's like I heard in the United States, it's something like 0 point something percent. And here I can imagine it's that, or maybe even a bit less. So we're talking about something that in the real world, right, in the natural way of things, they take a very small portion of the demographic of this country. And I think that taking the children and repeatedly, right, they don't just go once, right? They will go repeatedly. By the time they're out of school, I think they go like 3-4 times to these things. And then of course they talk about it in school and so on. So this is not just a once-off thing. Mm-hmm. Bringing them into that environment to try and create this image in their pre-adolescent heads that this is some kind of like, oh, this is just as normal as being heterosexual, right? Mm-hmm. I think that is, for one, it's not congruent with reality, so the information there is poor. Like, I doubt they say anywhere in all of this material or in all these exhibitions, by the way, people who are this make up, less than 99%, less than 0 point something percent, less than 1% of the population. I doubt they say that. And in a kid's mind, if you're just showing them like, oh yeah, like heterosexuality or male and female, well, there's also this, right? And to them, you're giving them the impression like, oh, okay, so calling myself whatever gender I want or being gay or queer is just on the same level as heterosexuality and being male or female.
So there we're talking about the quality of the information, to come back to the information. So on one hand, you have how important the topic is, and to different people, it's more important than others. And it's not even just people that find themselves being non-binary or having a different sexuality. A lot of people find this to be very important. So there, when it comes to the importance thing, you can't really just entirely go off of the percentage of people that are actually in that group, because it's important to more people than just that, right? Just like having rights for minorities, like ethnic minorities. Mm-hmm. It's not just important to them, right? It should be important to everyone, that everyone gets the same rights. So coming from there, if you go by actually how many people think it's important, then that does change its importance, right? Because importancy is a subjective phenomena. Mm-hmm.
And I would argue that the level of importance that it's taken in our societies is another consequence of this ideological agenda that has been pushed, especially in the last 10 years, to sort of make this so-called identity politics come to the surface and become this huge deal in our societies. Mm-hmm. So I think that the reason why there is such an importance placed on all this kind of stuff, this is relatively new, that this stuff takes such a big, has such a, the whole thing with even, in German, when they say like, for example, the word teacher or whatever in German, Lehrer, and then they add the Lehrerin, after it and so on. Yeah. All this stuff is quite recent, but anyway, I guess we went down a bit of a rabbit hole there about that topic.
No,
and that's probably
I think it's interesting. Oh, my camera just cut out again. Yeah. Let me redo that.
but the main point that I was making there was actually regarding that I find it so sad that my kids are not even taught basic logic in school. That
Is the
was
issue there more the absence of? Oh, wow, that's twice in a row. Is
Mhm.
the issue there sort of the potential that was going to waste?
The potential of educating.
Sorry, one sec. This is. Let me fix this. Yeah. Well, the time that could be spent. Um, have your kids learn what you would find as being more important.
I would think that every moment that my kids spend at school is time that should be used as wisely as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And I like I said, I would much rather prefer my children learning about logic in school than going to queer LGBTQ uh, plus museum exhibitions. Um, but just in general, in the education systems, I don't know if there's any education system in the Western world that actually has logic in the curriculum. That would be an interesting thing to find out. Um, I'd be surprised if there was a curriculum that actually taught logic. Um, and yet, I can't imagine. I can't imagine something more important than teaching logic. That seems to me to be a critically important topic to teach.
Yeah, I do think that in schools is taught a lot of what to think instead of how to think, and of
Correct.
course it's a very. Do you want schools to do that? Do you
Hmm.
actually want schools telling your kids how to think?
Yeah.
Um, on one hand, you as a parent probably feel like you would be the best person to do that. I don't know if you would actually entrust someone to teach your kids how to think. But of course, if we're going by a general system, not every parent should be the ones teaching their kids how to think, right? Some people, they do it better than others.
Yeah.
Um,
But then I think also the potential for damage is mitigated, where if you have an educational system that is teaching
Correct.
millions of children something that's rubbish, um, versus if you have a parent who is teaching their child rubbish or their children rubbish. Um, yeah, but I think we've spent the time that we wanted to spend on that topic of sense making. We can certainly bring it up on another follow up
Hmm.
podcast, and
It really feels like we just scratched the surface on that one.
it does. Sense making is a huge topic, and it's so. Maybe let's go over what we talked about. So first, we had information is vital to thought, and the the goal of thought is to come up with decisions that are beneficial.
Hmm.
And one of the ways in which we can ensure that our decisions are going to be in fact beneficial to us is to have good quality information. And by good quality, we mean the information needs to be an as accurate a reflection as possible of reality itself.
Hmm.
And number two, we need to think right. So we need to think logically, and we need to avoid falling into committing logical fallacies.
How?
The logical fallacy thing is quite easy, actually. People can look up logical fallacies online. Um, I can actually just quickly share this.
Well, when you said we need to think right, that's like a Well, yeah, of course. Of course we need to think right. But like how? What is thinking right?
Well, that's why I'm pointing again to logical fallacies, because to me, logical fallacies are just a good foundation. If you are aware of what logical fallacies are, and specifically, like, there's many different types of logical fallacies. I saw somewhere this massive list. Actually, there are a lot put on Wikipedia. But there's also more condensed, or the ones more commonly succumbed to logical fallacies. And I think if one were just aware of some of those basic logical fallacies, I think that would already make a huge difference in the way that they think about things. Because, for example, one of the most often fallen for fallacies is causation versus correlation, right? And this is something that, once you know it, you can't unknow it, right?
I wouldn't necessarily agree with that. Like, yeah, well, it depends on how you mean it. I would say that naturally we're built to to recognize correlation, not necessarily causation. I think the point of that is to recognize causation, but we perceive causation as correlation, right? You threw a rock, someone went ow, it was probably the rock. But maybe they tripped and fell. You don't know.
Right.
It's sort of looking into what are the things that happen and what is the most likely thing that connects them all.
Yeah.
Right. But you have like these these graphs. I don't know if you've seen this one, but I think there was like the correlation between something to do with pizza, cooking times, and kids drowning, something like this. You know, you have these graphs and they match weirdly perfectly. And of course they're not connected, but this is like the typical thing to do, right? You show people, hey, look, here's two graphs, look how they match. They are connected. And essentially I think what you were talking about before is look for causation, not correlation. Don't believe something just because it looks like it correlates. Look into it a little further and see, is that the actual cause?
Right. What are all the other factors that play a role here, right? And but what I meant by you can't unknow it was that once you know the principle of correlation does not equal causation, it's very difficult to fall into that trap again, because basically another one is the what is it called when you it's like anecdotal. That's it, right? Anecdotal information, right? So I saw this, I was walking down the street and I saw this, or I witnessed this happening, or I felt this, and so on. I ate a carrot and then the next day this happened, or whatever. So anecdotal evidence, that's another one. You can't, once you know these basic things, then it's almost like your brain won't let you ignore it, unless of course you are that sort of ideologically strung that you're just, all of a sudden logical fallacies don't matter.
I don't think so, actually. I think it's more it would be more normal and more common to have to do it consciously. I think just knowing the concept of causation and correlation and the differences between, it's not a difficult concept, but I think because we're physically, instinctively connected to correlation, it's an active thing that you have to do to be like, if you throw the stone, right, and you hear ow, you're immediately going to think it was because of the stone. And you have to pull yourself back and think, maybe it wasn't.
Yeah.
I think that's more normal instead of the former, where everything that's correlated, you immediately think, oh, that might not be it. Or maybe there's a mix of both and how used to dealing with it you are.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think with time it also gets more ingrained. Like if you
Right.
allow those things to kind of check you, then after a while they check you before you've even made an initial assumption. And so that changes with time. All
Right.
right.
Brilliant.
Do we want to jump into your topic?
Yeah, why not?
Why not?
Okay, so yeah, that was this guy's topic. All right, so what I was interested in talking about were sort of what everyone nowadays can relate to who lives online is the platforms that we use. So me and you right now to talk with each other, we're using Google Meets, which
Yeah.
I think your average person uses Google Meets about once and never. Like almost no one uses Google Meets
What?
regularly unless you're using it for business reasons or for work.
Mm.
Like you're probably not gonna chat with your friends who live at the other end of town on Google Meets, not unless you know them from work.
Okay. Mm.
So the most common platforms that I perceive people using, well, they change from region to region. But in Switzerland, for instance, we use a lot of WhatsApp. Like it's a very common app to use here. But in a lot of places in the world, like in the US, for example, they don't use WhatsApp very much.
Mm.
So I'm interested in talking about why people use certain platforms. There's the on one hand what they provide. So WhatsApp provides a very stable and consistent service. Like when you use WhatsApp, you know it's pretty much always going to work. I mean, it's backed by the Facebook, now Meta, infrastructure. So obviously that's a company that is built upon providing things consistently. Even though there are many alternatives, like me and you have adopted using Signal, which provides a very similar function to WhatsApp. It's essentially its direct competitor, among other alternatives. But you don't see nearly as many people using Signal. So it's not just what the platform provides, right? It's also, is it trend? Is it birds of a feather flock together? A feather.
I got
Like,
feathers.
is it just like, oh, your friends group is on WhatsApp, I'm gonna join WhatsApp? I think it does go into
But
that direction.
why was that friends group there to begin with?
That's the thing. Like, where does it start?
Yep.
Why do
Chicken or egg?
chicken or egg? It's a tough one. I mean, if you look at the service that Google was trying to provide, which was Google Plus, right? That was working to be a competitor of Facebook. That didn't go anywhere, even though they were providing a good service. They did everything that you needed there, and on top of it, it was connected with the Google infrastructure and with sort of the Google palette of apps, which pretty much everyone is involved with. Everyone has a Google account. Not everyone has a Facebook account. So why did people continue to use Facebook?
I think in the case of so first WhatsApp. I think in the case of WhatsApp, a lot of this has to do with monopolies, like pre-existing monopolies, where you have Facebook integrating WhatsApp into their thing, Facebook. But then the thing about Google Plus and Facebook, I think that has to do with Google trying to do too many things simultaneously. And
As in provide too many different services?
yeah,
Okay.
I think so. As far as I remember, and I might be wrong in this, Facebook started off with Facebook, and they started off with that basically that one product, and they just built that product up and did that for years and years and years. Meanwhile, Google had, of course, Google Search, and then they had Gmail, which was hugely popular. And I don't know at what point they added, for example, G Drive and so on, but like they had Google Hangouts. That was also very popular for chat.
They had Google Chat before that, I'm pretty sure, or Google
They
Talk.
had Google Talk.
Yeah.
Google Talk, then Google Hangouts, and now they have Google Chat, and Meets. But I think when Google Plus came around, it was just them trying to do spreading themselves out too thin, and they couldn't break successfully into the market of social media that Facebook had already developed over years and years and years. So I think a lot of this just has to do with monopolies, and those monopolies being able to hang on to their users. And others will try and come in and try to compete, but if they are not offering something that is wildly innovative and new and sexy and awesome, which Google Plus didn't really offer anything new on that score. It was just kind of very much, the functionality was very similar to Facebook.
There was no incentive to actually moving.
Not really. It was just like
Not
if you
enough,
wanted to sort of like keep everything in your Google ecosystem. But for people who had, a Facebook account, who had that Facebook account for years already, right? And that's the thing. It's like, how are you gonna get everyone to switch over to something else? And that's damn difficult. I mean, I know because in our family, right, we were trying to use alternatives. So for a while, we used this product called Family Wall. Family Wall is a very cute little service. It's developed by a company in France, a family-owned, family-run company in France. And we used that service as a replacement for Facebook for, what was it, 2 years? Something like that.
We used it for a while, yeah.
Yeah. And I was in contact back and forth with their developers, giving them a lot of detailed feedback on the product. And I just wasn't seeing them develop in the direction of social media, and they were developing more in the direction of planning and sort of household planning and that sort of organization and stuff like that. So then we dropped them, and we went to MeWe, which MeWe is kind of a knockoff of Facebook, honestly.
Yeah.
It's very similar. The functionality and everything is very similar to Facebook. And so far I'm quite happy with the way that MeWe is performing. It doesn't have all the noise that you have in Facebook. But yeah.
But people haven't really caught on to MeWe, even in our family.
No.
That includes me. Like I mean, part of that is that MeWe doesn't
but you're
play
on Facebook either, right? Or no, you are,
Facebook. But I mean, I have a Facebook account, but I haven't used Facebook actively for years now. I think for the last 3 years I haven't used Facebook. And pretty much any Facebook services, Facebook platforms, or I guess now Meta platforms, I've not been using because I found alternatives. And partly it's because I don't like the way that the Meta company operates. They work in a way that basically, of course, it serves their own interests, but they work to monopolize things. You can see this how they took over a bunch of different companies in the last couple of years. They took over the Oculus company doing VR. They took over WhatsApp, just to name a couple. And specifically what they did when they took over Oculus was something that really turned me off to that company, which was essentially in order to use Oculus products now, you have to have a Facebook account, which wasn't something. It's a VR headset. You shouldn't have to have a Facebook account to use a VR headset. The only reason they did that was to force people into getting into their ecosystem. If you have a Facebook account, may as well use Facebook, may as well use that account with Instagram, which is currently, actually kind of surprisingly, they haven't made it mandatory to have a Facebook account to use Instagram. That's something they could do quite easily. And so currently, Instagram is the only Meta product that I use because they allow me to use a separate login and not a Facebook login.
Okay.
Not that there's anything wrong with using a Facebook login, but it's just kind of me saying I shouldn't have to do this, so I won't. There's some stubbornness on my part, but I feel like, you know, for instance, if you have to give in a picture of your ID to sign up to a chatting service, that's like, it's going too far. Even if they're probably not going to do anything wrong with it, it's like, no, you're stepping too far there. So getting relatively back on topic. So right now, the platforms that we have are pretty well established, especially the ones that people have been using consistently for years and years. Like Facebook is very well established, Instagram as well now. And especially for Instagram, I feel like that's quite unique in that I have never seen, in my time using Instagram, I've never seen another service that even holds a candle to it. There is zero competition on the market for Instagram. So on one side, I don't like the fact that I don't have a choice in what I use when it comes to wanting something that provides me that service. But there's also the issue that literally every user of Instagram has, is that they don't have a say in what Instagram does. Instagram can do whatever they want with that platform, and their users will continue to use it because they don't have anywhere else to go. Similarly with YouTube, that's become an issue, where they removed the dislike button. No one wanted that. If you were to do a poll on all of the users, the poll would say keep the dislike button, but they were able to do it because people have nowhere else to go.
Right.
So in using platforms like Signal or even Family Wall, these are platforms where you do have a say in what the company does, because what you do in choosing to use it or not, first off, you have that choice, and also there is the viable option to leave and to damage that company by essentially speaking with your actions and speaking with your wallet.
Yeah, I guess these bigger
on Insta.
Right, and it's not an option because, well, where else would you go? Is that what you're the point you're making?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's for YouTube, there are growing alternatives to, for example, YouTube. You have now Odyssey, you have Rumble, you have, what's the other one? Those are the two biggest ones, I think.
Currently, there was another platform which was actually doing pretty well considering it was going up against YouTube. I've forgotten it now. It had the word video in the title. Maybe I can find that. Vimeo.
Vimeo. Okay,
Vimeo was relatively popular. If you were to go on sites like Reddit or just even on Facebook, anywhere, you would see quite consistently links to Vimeo. So people were uploading there quite consistently. But YouTube was able to hold on to the monopoly on part because they're connected to Google, and Google has the resources to do pretty much anything. And I think that was actually the main part of it. YouTube is a better product than Vimeo.
Yeah.
Even though YouTube uses that influence to do things that its customer base doesn't want them to do.
Yeah.
But they still do offer more than Vimeo, much in the way that Instagram offers more than any alternatives.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the biggest thing is that a lot of people, they want to be on a social network where there's a lot of other people, right?
That's the point.
And yeah, that's kind of the point of social networking.
Social network with just you.
Yeah. But then again, I mean, a lot of these other platforms, again, Rumble and Odyssey, they are growing exponentially. They are huge. And the future seems to be in something that is kind of like this mesh networking stuff where you have what is it called?
Blockchain.
Yeah, blockchain and that sort of thing going. That seems to be the future, and hopefully it'll be the case that more and more services will be open sourcing as well, and then people can actually just start making their own sites and stuff, their own social networks, essentially built on this what's the word? The opposite of
on the network, like the network of nodes.
Decentralized services.
Right. Well, how do you think that will impact the way that people choose and use platforms?
I think at the moment, one of the biggest problems we have with platforms in general is the curation problem. So this is going into another whole rabbit hole here to do with the whole topic of censorship.
Let's make it a mouse hole, shall we?
Yeah. I think that is really the biggest problem that we have is the curation of information. And it's going in every direction. It's going all over the place, and bubbles are being formed and so on. Echo chambers are being formed because of this. And this goes back to our sense-making topic regarding us needing information, but we need the information to be good quality. And if you are living in an echo chamber where the information that you are getting, let's say 80% of the information you are seeing is, I don't know, pro-vegan or something like that, because it's curated for you as a user, then you are going to, psychologically, you're going to be living in this world where being vegan is like, it's just like, it's super normal. It's 80% of what's going on. But in reality, it's the opposite. It's something like 10-20% maybe of society.
Well, that ties into your digital life balance, right? Because online you yourself can curate your reality there, and a lot of platforms will more than happily help you along with that. If you click on, I did this the other day because I was looking for a pressure cooker. I searched for a pressure cooker and I found it, the one I wanted, and I went to the one place in Switzerland where they sell it. And for the next week, I got ads of that exact same pressure cooker from the exact same store on basically any website that provided Google ads.
Yeah.
So, and of course, it's not the same with ads as on your timeline, but it works in the same way, roughly, where you show interest in a topic and you will be fed more of it. So it's essentially a positive feedback loop.
Yeah.
Which I don't think is ever a good thing.
No.
I don't think even you can have too much of even something good. At the best thing for you to have is a mix of everything.
Yeah, or just being able to decide for yourself what you want to tune in that day. really without being bombarded with, so for example, if I'm on Twitter, um, Twitter, like Facebook, YouTube, they've all got these algorithms running in the background that are constantly looking at what you're looking at, right?
Mm.
What you're clicking on, how much time you're spending on what, and so on. And based on all that information that it's collecting, it's presenting you with stuff. So on Twitter, for example, it'll say, what's the thing when it says like, do you want to follow these people, right? It advises you to follow certain people. And so because I am sort of center right in my, I guess, in my beliefs or my standards or whatever, I'm constantly being shown people who are sort of in that vein as well, center right. And the same occurs on, Facebook, the amount of stuff that I'm seeing from certain places, and it gives me the wrong impression, but only because I'm aware of that can I really put that into check and say, okay, yeah, this is not,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that again has to do with that whole sense making thing. Like, you have to be aware that this is a curated, a cushioned little bubble that it's presenting you of what reality is, but it's actually very, very, very low information, very low quality information. The reality is that if you go out into the world, I'm not gonna be presented with Tucker Carlson, like I'm not, you know what I mean? Like, he's not gonna be there. But when I'm on YouTube, it's just like the guy is freaking everywhere,
Are you a
And
Tucker Carlson viewer?
No, I barely ever watch his stuff, but for some reason, the other content that I'm watching is somehow algorithmed with Tucker Carlson, So it's yeah. And
it didn't always used to be like that as well. I remember still when YouTube would, without really fiddling too much with how it worked, if you were subscribed to a channel, they uploaded, you saw the video in your feed if you go into your subscribers feed. And in that way, by subscribing to a channel, you show interest in the channel, obviously. So you're seeing something that you're interested in. But if you yourself are interested in more than one thing, I think most people are, you subscribe to a whole bunch of different types of channels. Gardening, cooking, learning how buildings work, anything. Prank channels. And so just automatically you will be seeing consistently a bunch of different stuff just from your subscribers list. And I remember when they took that away, where they decided to curate your feed without giving you an option to have any alternative, to have the old alternative. The feed, on one hand, it got a lot easier to watch because YouTube was providing me with content that I had learned I wanted to see or would click on. But it didn't learn what would be satisfying to me. It didn't learn what I actually would feel good after seeing. It just knows what I click on. And for people that have ADHD, they know this very well. Those two things are not the same. What you click on and what you like would feel good clicking on are two different things. And just having constantly like a YouTube channel cut, don't click on their videos, because if you do, even though a lot of them are interesting, half of your YouTube feed is just cut videos. And it's just like, you can only watch so many hours of cut videos before your brain starts melting. So yeah, the curation aspect is definitely one of the reasons why I think a competitor could do so well. Like you mentioned, Odyssey, or was it Rumble that you mentioned? Odyssey and Rumble. I don't know how their curation works or if they do any curation, but that is a selling point that they could use, is that they'll actually show you the content that you specifically showed interest in, not just the thing that their algorithm picked up.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that what this is doing is actually creating a very unhealthy state of affairs in the real world, in our actual in the societies that we live in, because I mean the amount of time that one spends on social media, and it's not just YouTube, it's it's Facebook, Instagram, even like everything. On any given day, a lot of people are spending hours on social media every day,
Hmm.
and that is again, it's information that's coming into their brain. That's it's a lot of it is subliminal. We don't even notice how our brain is interpreting this information.
Hmm.
But basically, we are being bombarded with information that is telling us that we are that how do you say that is affirming what we think to be true. So it's self-affirming
Yeah,
information.
which feels
And
good.
that's the thing. It feels good, and that brings up the point of these. I think these algorithms are made to do that. That's what I think these algorithms are for, is to make
Hmm.
you actually spend more time, because it's like a dopamine effect. Spend more time on these platforms, to have
Hmm.
an addiction to using these platforms, because it just feels good to constantly have your views, your opinions, verified and
Hmm.
acknowledged and nodded to.
But there's a differentiation to be made there. Just
Mm,
simply feeling good, it doesn't cover it quite, because it only the algorithms don't try and make you feel really good. They just try and make you feel a little bit good. Because if they actually were to make you feel really good, you would be fulfilled. Or maybe you would feel so good that the next piece of stuff that they could offer you wanes in comparison and you get bored. So they'll just keep you at this level of just interested enough to
mm-hmm,
keep going. But none of the stuff you're actually looking at is really interesting. It's all just barely enough to keep you there.
mm-hmm,
If they actually showed you like a documentary, which you might be really interested in, um, and you watch it, and at the end of it, you've got that information. You've been invested. You've been interested, and then you think, okay, that was good. It was nice to see that. I'm gonna go do something else now.
mm-hmm,
Like, you're not gonna watch another 2-hour documentary after you just watched
mm-hmm,
one,
mm-hmm,
because it was enough.
mm-hmm,
And I feel this when I go on my feed. All of the stuff there, it never brings me to the point of thinking, oh, that was actually a really good video. It's always
mm-hmm.
just, and from a lot of the channels that I've subscribed to where they consistently put out really good videos, I don't see them that much in my feed.
Hmm. Okay.
They're a little bit too good.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. I think that the negative aspect of getting the sort of that positive feedback loop that you were talking about, the affirmation,
Mm,
is that okay? Let's put it like this: if someone came to you on the street with a pamphlet and it said the Earth is flat,
mm.
um, I mean, you probably wouldn't take him too seriously. Probably be like, yeah, okay, I've got better things to do with my time, right? It's kind of like,
I mean, to be honest, you don't see one of those out in the wild very often. So I'd be like, "Woo!" Like, I'm gonna hang this up.
let's
This
have
is
fun
like
with
this
this.
is rare.
Yeah, yeah.
Can
But
I add you on Insta?
the thing is that our perception of the world is that the Earth is round, right? That's by and large the accepted truth, right? That the Earth is
Isn't
round.
that anecdotal? Have you ever seen
Ooh.
the full, like, you have
Yeah,
no
yeah. It might be anecdotal,
cold hard
but
evidence that the Earth is
yeah,
actually round?
or that strawberry is red, right? That's the whatever you want to pick, right? We have certain things that everyone just accepts as being true, right? Cows go moo,
It's
whatever.
a conspiracy.
Yeah. So if someone comes along and says cows don't go moo, one isn't going to really pay much attention to them. One is going to be like, ugh, whatever, man. Got better things to do with my life. Now, I would say that the reason why we don't pay much attention to that is because of that consensus. Because we feel like, come on, the consensus is that the thing goes moo. You know, like, come on, right? Now, what happens if you are spending hours every day in an echo chamber that doesn't say the cow goes moo, but that tells you that, I don't know, guns are the best thing since toilet paper was invented, or whatever, right? You're going to come out of that into the real world and encounter perhaps someone who is going to say, guns are the worst thing ever. And you're not going to take them seriously. You're gonna scoff them off. You're gonna be like, you know, the person who's confronted with the person who says cows don't go moo, because you've come out of that. You've been sort of like conditioned psychologically to believe that, you know, because if you're surrounding yourself with pieces of information that are affirming your belief that there's nothing better than walking around town with two in your holster, you know, why should you pay any attention to anyone else? And I think that is the problem that it creates in our society, where people don't take one another seriously anymore. We don't actually try and communicate and have discourse with one another because we're walking out of that digital echo chamber. And anything outside of that, we don't even know how to actually, and this comes back to the sense-making thing, we don't know how to think.
This is the thing about echo chambers. There are specific types of people that are in echo chambers. And I used to be in echo chambers. I tend to avoid them nowadays. But from being in them and from now looking on them outwardly, the types of people that are in there are the exact type of people that you're talking about. They're people that when they come out of their echo chamber, they don't handle other opinions critically. They disregard them. These are the exact kinds of people that echo chambers sort of, they filter for only those people. Because if anyone thinks critically, they don't exist in an echo chamber very long. They leave themselves or they're kicked out. Majority rules. And so, right, on the internet, when you're having a bunch of these echo chambers, I think partly they filter for just those kinds of people, but they provide a perfect space where if someone who's perhaps a bit naive goes into there, they're surrounded by a bunch of people that think the same way. It's not just that they believe the same thing. They almost identify themselves with that belief that defines that echo chamber. And the only way to persist in there is to adhere to how they think. And if you're in there long enough, then when you walk out again, you've become one of them. But in saying that, that takes a certain kind of person to be in an echo chamber. Even if you agree with what they're saying in there. Like for me, if I were to go into a chat and they were agreeing with everything I say, but everyone in that chat agreed with one another, I would feel weird, because I just out of instinct, it's a red flag to me when no one is disagreeing with one another. That means that there's something wrong there, because in a natural environment, in a place that's not filtered, people will disagree. And it also speaks to being genuine. I don't think there's any two people on the planet that would agree with each other 100%.
On everything, yeah.
And if no one is criticizing anyone in an entire group of people chatting, these people are not being genuine. Everyone is just trying to adhere to what everyone else is saying. Everyone is just trying to maintain the peace of the bubble. So it's not only that everyone is thinking the same, it's they're not actually saying what they're thinking. It's not a place where anything productive can happen. So even though it might feel nice, like, hey, look, all these people agree with me, I don't even think they do. They just don't want to say that they don't agree with me.
There's other motives, right? There's other motives than...
Maybe it's people that just don't want conflict.
Correct, yeah.
Or are afraid that if they were to engage in a critical conversation, that would inflict mental or emotional damage on them.
The triggering. No, but absolutely, with sense making, again, there is, again, it's such an incredibly complex topic, but it comes down, even if you can make sense correctly of the reality around you, the decision you take can still actually be one that is wrong, in the way that, for example, you might, on a short-term basis, you might think that, well, I'm going to decide to go along with the status quo. And you will be making that decision for the obvious reason that, go along to get along, right? And so on a short-term basis, that may be to your benefit, right? You're not going to be ostracized, you're not going to be pariahed, an outcast of society and all this kind of stuff. Or just even of your social circle. But of course, in the long run, well, depending on what it was that you went along with, in the long run, it might be something not to your benefit. So even if you have an understanding of reality that is accurate, you can still, and this is the irrationality of human beings coming to the fore, you can still take that reality and basically chuck it over your shoulder and do something entirely different.
Right, exactly. Like, no one is equipped with perfect rationality.
Correct. We are irrational.
Everyone, this is the crazy thing. Everyone, if they're being honest with themselves, they'll sit there and say, I'm wrong about something that I believe in 100%.
Yeah.
Everyone is wrong about something like that.
Yeah.
And if you're actually honest with yourself and you believe that, on one hand, it's kind of destabilizing in a way. I remember when I first sort of like had that epiphany, because when I was much younger, I was like, I was right about everything all the time. Everything. Yeah, and I was an asshole as well. And then when I had that epiphany, like, holy shit, I'm wrong about so much. How do I even know anything? Like, how do I orient myself in life if I can't trust myself to know anything? And it took time for me to, and it's an ongoing process still, to sort of be comfortable in the fact that I don't know everything, but I can still move in the direction that I feel is right, whilst being open and being critical of what I'm doing and ready to change my mindset, which is very much easier said than done for anyone. Yeah, so we went off on a bit of a tangent there because we were talking about platforms and but yeah, this is a very interesting topic. Maybe we can dive into this one deeper in the future. Going back to the original topic of platforms, in the recent past, we've experienced a little bit of a shift when it comes to online platforms, and one of the most notable of those is the meteoric rise of TikTok, right? So TikTok didn't exist for years and years and years. The closest thing that we had to TikTok, I love that grin, is
I have no idea.
The closest thing that we had to TikTok was Vine, right? So the whole premise of short videos that you predominantly would film on your phone, but you could film them somewhere else and upload there. But just sort of like these little these not full format videos, which was just like the standard. You would plan out a video, you would make a video, your vlog, your gaming video or something. And the concept of just making a 10-second video, just making a little skit, just a little something like this, that was revolutionary. And that took the world by storm when Vine came on the scene. And then that was sort of phased out by TikTok, which now has all but replaced it. But the fact that people jumped on that so quickly after being so used to everything that came before it. And honestly, I was a late adopter of this format. I wasn't an original user of Vine, and it took me quite a long time to get on board with TikTok, because I'm pretty sure that you also have this impression of it, or had this impression of it. Outwardly, TikTok is just cringe. It's just, when you look at sort of the community on there outwardly, the people that call themselves TikTokers, for instance, it's not, it doesn't hold pedigree, or at least it's something new that we haven't experienced before, so it's hard to be like, oh yeah, that's a thing now. But you have people who've been completely defined by their TikTok notoriety. Hey Jordan, what's going on, man? And so the fact that that was able to happen after so long, us sticking to this one format, that almost goes against the idea of a monopoly. And then after TikTok did this, you saw pretty much any platform that had the ability to, they made a function to imitate TikTok. Like with YouTube Shorts, on Instagram, they have the, I don't remember what it's called, but it's essentially the exact same thing. Okay. You swipe, there comes another 10-second video. And so there is a way to get people to move from the platforms that they're on. But
what platform did they move from?
Well, here's the thing.
You said TikTok, Vine. I've never heard of it.
Vine was actually, I was mostly exposed to Vine via re-uploads on YouTube. So those were extremely popular, the so-called Vine compilations. Cringe talk. I don't know if you have the chat open for you, but I'm looking at it. So Vine basically pioneered this idea of short format videos, and then TikTok basically took that concept and made a slam dunk with it. And at this point, TikTok is as solid as Facebook. Like, they're not going anywhere. Or, I mean, they had that little run-in with the US government wanting to ban it, but that didn't work. That was close, though. That could have wrecked them. Or at least partly. But yeah, it didn't replace anything that was there before. So it's not quite people moving, it's people adopting a new format.
Well, I guess TikTok sort of was able to tap into a human desire to portray oneself in a certain way for a certain duration.
There was that, yeah. It was extremely social.
I can imagine that behind these platforms, no, I don't have to imagine. I think we can be sure that behind these platforms, there is a lot of psychoanalysis going on, a lot of, psychological research and development, R&D going on. I mean, these platforms are essentially tapping into some of the most base instincts of what it means to be human. And I don't know if one can say that it's all to that it's overall to our benefit either.
Probably not. I don't think TikTok is saving anyone.
No. But it seems to be that these platforms, they tap into something that is sort of innate in human beings' behavior and who we are. But then what they do is they they just make a huge thing of it, and that's where I'm not so sure that that's necessarily a healthy thing, you know.
I don't think it is a healthy thing, but I think we can learn from that. I mean, the way that TikTok took over was perhaps not the way that we want to use unnecessarily, because it is in a way taking advantage of just the way that our minds work in not a helpful way. But I think it would be positive for everyone, because the internet and the way that we consume information online is so connected to these platforms that we use, that I think it's absolutely essential that in the future we find a way to, as you said, decentralize. Because as long as we're using these platforms, we have no control over what they do.
Yeah.
They can do whatever they want.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, some people will say, well, at the end of the day, if you don't own the hardware, right? If you don't control the uplink to whatever it is that you want to run, then, you know, you're always going to have to trust someone, essentially. But that's where these, I don't know, there's this guy, Ian Crossland, who's, he was, I think he still is, one of the main guys behind Minds.com.
Okay.
And he's very knowledgeable about this stuff and all this mesh networking, decentralized services, online services, and he's a big proponent of free the code, as he says. Free the code, Ian. So that's his take on everything. That's his answer to everything, is free the code. Which, yeah. He took, what is it, the CEO of Getter. So Getter is like a Twitter alternative. The CEO, he took him to task on Getter and said, oh man, just free the code. You know, he said, zero trust. You know, I can't believe a word that you're saying, you know, not because one thinks you are an untrustworthy person, but my due diligence says that I should not trust what you're saying. You know what I mean? So free the code so I can have a look at it myself, you know?
You have people debating about socialism and capitalism, right? Sort of, should we be moving in the direction? Yeah, this is a weird segue, but I promise it's connected. No, like people are, you've certain people that say like we should be moving in the direction of socialism, and others that say no, capitalism works, right? I personally don't think that either work, because whereas I don't think so. If you look at, like, by geographical region, you have different policies being used, right? You have more socialist governments, you have more capitalist societies, but the internet is really capitalist. There's a lot less regulation in the way of who can win. Like, there's obviously certain laws that are tied to geographical region where stuff is getting hosted. But the thing is, you can host your stuff. You can choose where to host your stuff. Like, you can choose whatever rule set that you want. And if you want to make it big, you're going to go with capitalist. Obviously, right? Like, if you go by capitalist rules, you're going to get to the top of the pyramid the easiest. And we can see what that's done. Yeah. It's made a handful of companies monopolizing everything.
I don't know that I fully agree with that, which is me saying I don't agree with that. No, a lot of times when people... Tell us how you really feel. A lot of time when people say this is capitalism... what they're referring to is actually
free market.
What some people call crony capitalism, which is essentially, if you look at monopolies a lot of times, I don't know if I can say most of the time, but a lot of times monopolies are existing because of government intervention. So whether
Mm,
it's government contracts or government subsidies, whatever, something government related, that these companies are getting some kind of boost by the government.
mm,
And so I don't like the other thing you said about, well, you can just host your stuff wherever you like. I don't know if you know what happened with Gab some time
no.
ago, Parlor. Well, so Gab basically has been an alternative social media platform as well, and they've been building all their own hardware. So they have their own server farms and all their own hardware.
Mm,
But Parlor, and the situation with Gab is that the monopolies, so the credit card companies and so on, basically they were untouchable because they had their own hardware. The only thing that happened was Google Play Store and the Apple, what's it called, Apple Store, or just, I don't know what it's called,
yeah.
kicked their apps off of
iTunes.
their
Yeah.
their apps off of their platforms. But then you look what happened to Parler. Parler was an alternative to Twitter,
Mm, mm,
and what Parler did was they hosted on Amazon servers,
yeah.
and
Yeah.
Amazon came along and just went goodbye.
That's true. Yeah.
So this is the thing, like, and these kind of services you cannot like, sure, if you're going to build a website, you can host that pretty much, anywhere you want. But
Mm,
if you're building a social media network or anything regarding big content, big data, you can't, there's only a few. That's the monopolies again. There's only a few
that's true.
services in the world that you can use to host that on.
Mm,
And so, but again, I would say that has more to do with corporations and government working hand in hand rather than an actual free market enterprise system.
hmm
But
That's true. So the companies monopolizing the market are actually gatekeeping um, other potential companies, other potential services.
oh yeah, and you can be sure that at some point, every one of these companies who are trying to actually compete with the big boys, um, at some point they're gonna be come to and offered a huge pile of cash to
Yeah,
sell out.
yeah,
So
yeah. You see that everywhere. Um, I don't know if you heard about Blizzard Activision, sort of the
getting
game
bought
development
by
company.
Microsoft, right?
Yeah, which is really funny because, I mean, it's funny and it's terrifying in a way, especially for someone who metaverse intensifies. For someone who is a gamer. Ha. Originally, Activision was its own company, and they actually had an even smaller development studio, Infinity Ward, which they I'm not entirely sure if this is true, but this is how sort of I understand it. They acquired Infinity Ward, and then they themselves got acquired by Blizzard, which then became Blizzard Activision, and now they're getting acquired by Microsoft. So it's like the actual food chain through time, which is just crazy. And everything is moving towards one company owning
Yeah.
all of the smaller ones.
Yeah.
So even if you do have I mean, it's the same thing that's going on with like mom and pop shops, right? It's just everything is moving towards centralized control, where one entity controls all of the little sources, all of the little services.
Mm-hmm.
And now that when Microsoft acquires Activision Blizzard, they have full control over that corner. Of course, there are, honestly, luckily, multiple players in that field. Imagine only having one company that can produce all games, or one company that can produce all of a certain type of media. That's like, we're moving towards actual full-on dystopia right here. Loris just wrote, same with Disney and the movie market. Exactly. They're acquiring Lucasfilm. They're acquiring freaking everything. At some point, like, what do we do as, at the end of the day, right? The consumer has the power. Even though as an individual, it really doesn't feel like it, but money talks. If you put money in a direction, the market will work to fill that direction. Follows the money. Gaming dystopia.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Like everyone, the sense I get with a lot of these things is the same sense I get about anything else that I view in the world that I'm looking at. I'm saying, well, if everyone just did X, then, you know, yeah, and it's
we
like,
need that coordination. Just everyone, just stop using this platform if they do BS. Like, boycotting is actually a really powerful thing if it's used correctly.
Well, and the bigger question to me is, okay, fair enough, but what am I doing? Right? So what am I doing? The vast majority of my online content I view through YouTube, you know, and that's feeding the machine,
right?
That's feeding the beast. We are doing this live stream right now on YouTube.
We're going to upload it to Instagram. We're going to upload it to TikTok.
Right. But we could be doing this live stream right now on Rumble, for example, you know? So that's the point. Like, I mean, the only way that this shift is going to occur, and I think this shift is starting to occur already. I saw one YouTuber, a Swiss YouTuber who has like, I don't know, 25,000, not a huge following, but, you know, something like 25,000 or so subscribers on YouTube. And he's just set up on Rumble now. And so basically what he's doing now is he does these little intros on YouTube live. And then 10 minutes into it, he says, okay, and now I'm shutting off the cast for YouTube, and, you know, and anyone who wants to continue watching can come onto Rumble. You know, it's free of charge.
Yep.
You can come watch him on Rumble. And just within a couple weeks, he has like 5,000 plus views on his Rumble videos, which for something that's done also in Swiss German, it's kind of like, ooh,
that's a feat. Yeah.
So he is actually pulling. He's doing some good work there, in my opinion. He's actually pulling people from the monopoly of YouTube and introducing them to Rumble. So that's one thing that we can do to mitigate that.
Well, that was part of our planning, right? I think we spoke about this in our last stream, where we were talking about the different platforms that we want to use. And I think the goal of that, on one hand, is use the term to spread the net as wide as possible to gain followers from as many places as possible.
Yeah,
as possible. And there's so many benefits to that. Not only are you increasing your ability to gain an audience, but you're going to every echo chamber or every community, and you're saying, hey, we want you to join in. So you get as many different people in there as possible. And
diversity.
You're also, diversity. That's what it's all about. And we're also intending on uploading our content to all of these platforms, which reinforces what we're trying to do there. And it also supports these platforms. It's putting our contribution, while we're contributing to the YouTube bubble, we're contributing equally to every bubble. So it's not about, I don't think the right way to do it is just say, not going to watch YouTube. I'm not going to use any more of X platform. Or even if you move out of the internet space, you have conglomerates that have a whole corner of the market, right? You can't just up and say, I'm not going to buy anything that has anything to do with that conglomerate. It's like, okay, well, now you're just living off of some grass you're growing in your backyard. I think it's about contributing equally, if you contribute in a direction that supports a monopoly, if you contribute equally in the other direction, all it takes is for not even everyone to do it, but enough people to do the same thing for the competitors to actually gain a foothold. Yeah. And then it's that becomes a positive feedback loop.
You definitely don't need a majority. That is absolutely true. Typically, it's with this sort of societal shifts, you're talking about 25-30%, something like that. And once you get that swing, it's sort of like the rest just kind of falls in line.
Right.
And I think what we're seeing already is the popularity of these other platforms is increasing, and once people have a taste of operating in a space that is not curated, also in a space that is not like, one of the biggest things, honestly, and I see it with a lot of people on YouTube, is they just say, we can't talk about that here. And it's not even, it's just such a weird world to be living in, we can't talk about that here. Oh, nope, we're on YouTube. Oh, yes, we're on YouTube, and it's, and they'll even have, I've watched episode, and this is not like right-wing stuff either. This is just like liberal conversations. And what they'll do is they'll very carefully, but it is noticeable, they'll cut pieces out. So you'll see that in the editing, it's actually been cut. There's pieces that are cut out. There's also this German liberal who does interviews and stuff. And every time there is something being said in the interview that goes against the YouTube guidelines, he has this overlay audio of a dog barking.
Yeah, people do this all the time, where they just have like sound bites where they say something.
Yeah, and he just has his dog. And the first time I heard it, I was like, what the heck? Why does he have a dog barking? Like,
I love that.
Close the door or something, And then I realized, it's actually barking so that you can't hear what the guy is saying. It's like
so much better than the bleep.
Yes.
Oh, thank goodness we got rid of that.
But I think this is one thing that is really going to, once people have that experience of being on a platform where you can talk naturally, like where people can just talk, it's and then they're like, ugh, now I have to go back to that safe space, YouTube, it's regression. It just feels like regression,
Yeah, it's true.
Go to Odyssey, go to Rumble, and you just have people like talking like you would normally talk, So,
well, the thing is with a lot of these other platforms, and we spoke about this off stream, where the majority of the people using those platforms are people that they haven't found a home on the platforms that most people use.
They're homeless.
Right? Yeah, they're homeless. But that means that they're also a certain kind of people. It's not just where everyone's talking the same way, like you would in real life, just interacting as if there are no other ramifications other than social, right? Yeah. So even on those spaces where they're more or less created for people to speak openly and have differing opinions and just speak openly, they're filled by, again, a certain kind of person, which not necessarily reinforces an echo chamber, but it's not that balanced environment which would be ideal. And when we were a lot of these platforms that you suggested for posting our content to, I know very little about them. And then looking at their content, some of them I thought, hey, that's a pretty nice mix. And other ones I was a bit iffy about, sort of like, this looks like it's echo chambery. I think I didn't say that like that at that point, but sort of got that feeling of this feels like all of these people are agreeing a little too much. Stop agreeing.
Fight.
And I think that's also useful for people that don't have to move. Like, not just people that don't feel comfortable on YouTube should be using these other places. Basically, people that want to be criticized should move to other places.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Or not necessarily move, but at least contribute to them.
Contribute, yeah. Just be part of the discourse.
Right.
Yep. Well, I don't know if we want to wrap up with that.
I was about to say we've hit 2 hours and we've covered this one nice and well.
Yeah, we have.
So normally at this point we would we would do something interactional, but since we're connected over cyberspace, I think right here we can just wrap it up. So if we're talking about the next stream that we're doing, that one might be... What do you think about that one?
Well, time-wise, we want to do this every Thursday. So this time around, we're doing it on Wednesday because Vincent here has to have 4 of his smartest, wisest teeth removed tomorrow. So that's why we're doing it today and not tomorrow, when usually we want to do this every Thursday at 7 o'clock local time. So I think, next week we'll do it Thursday, 10th. I believe it's the 10th of February. 10th of February. And we will come up with 2 topics rather. 2 topics to discuss next time. And the hope is that with time we're going to have some guests also calling in on the show. And so that we can also have a bit of a wider participation as well.
Yeah.
So on that happy note, and the other thing is that we will be doing some taste testing in every show.
That we couldn't do today.
We didn't do it today.
Some reviews.
Normally we'd be swigging back a couple beers and tasting some sort of... Yeah, what is that? Sake.
I'm not going to tell you because I actually wanted to use that as one of the tastings.
Aha.
It's a secret.
Okay. Something to look forward to then. Well, thank you everyone that tuned in, and if you're watching this as an upload on any of the other platforms, then thanks for watching. Yep. And see you all next time. Take care.
See you guys. Thanks.
Ciao.
Ciao.